I'm Gina Barlean, and I want to thank the Nebraska State Historical Society for inviting me to come. And I appreciate that very much because we love to talk about the NSHS and the things that we're doing in Butler County. As he said, I take care of social media, which is hilarious because I'm 61 and I don't know that much about it. But I do try. I know what I know, and I know how to do what I know. So. We put on a series of programs in 2023 that was called the Towns of the County Program Series, and we're so proud of it, and that's what I'm going to be talking to you about today, our planning process, our collaborators, and how it all came to fruition and what came after. And one of the things that came after was a book that I wrote, or that we wrote using the transcripts from every presentation that we had in 2023. So that's been our major fundraiser for the year. We're super proud of the project because we involve people from all over our county, and we continue to bring history programs to Butler County and the people of our area. And I believe that there are 3 specific ideas that made our Towns of the County program series successful. And planning a program series can be so daunting. So I have created handouts that you should all have. And they cover the things that I often consider when planning an event or series of events. So please keep those handouts in front of you. Keep them in mind as I go through my presentation and jot down ideas, comments, questions, and we're going to talk about it at the end of my presentation. And like I said, the 3 key points that I feel were really important in making the whole series come off was utilizing the power of storytelling. Brock told a really good story about seeing a man weep. Those are the kind of things that stories can communicate in history that you just can't communicate with dates and places. Also, the benefit of collaboration. In our small town, when you can collaborate with another organization, it just gives you so much more power and synergy, and I'm going to talk about that later. And then inviting our local people to be our speakers, I think, was the secret sauce of the whole program. Sometimes you think you have to bring people in, professionals in from out of town and pay them a lot of money, and we just ended up finding out that our local people were gold mines, and it made just a major difference in the pride of our county, and we're seeing that now in other months and years. So look for these factors when I'm having my presentation. Can everybody hear me? This isn't better, is it? It's okay. Okay, good. Okay. So I want to take a moment to tell you about our organization. The Butler County Historical Society was created in the late 60s by a woman in a business club. She decided we needed to save our artifacts and our history in a special way. So the organization was highly involved in like the Nebraska Centennial, the Davidson Centennial, and the Bicentennial of the United States. They even published a history book in 1983 that was really well received. A book company came through the county and helped them do it all. And over the years, the group, though, pretty much focused on having monthly meetings and talking with each other about history and then preserving those artifacts and putting those artifacts out in their depot museum. The Burlington Northern Railroad gave them a depot, and that was pretty much the extent of what they did as a historical society. And by the year 2000, a lot of those members were still some of the original members, and they were getting pretty old, you know, and it was harder for them to do a lot of things. They did not have, you know, muscle and manpower, so it just got to be quite a bit for them to do beyond opening the doors in the summer to please come in and see our old artifacts. So, and of course the Depot Museum started to get a little run down because it was built in 1915. So no really good running water systems. You always had to shut the water off in the fall. No heating, no air conditioning, so no temperature control. And no accessibility for people with physical challenges. The parking lot was just crumbling, big, massive potholes. It was actually probably dangerous. And like I said, they just couldn't find people to do the work, even if they would have had some ideas of what they could have done. The artifacts were not being cataloged. So the current board of directors over the last 10 years have really focused on getting that depot museum back in shape, which was a large task. And again, like most of our little historical societies, there's 5 to 7 maybe people who are really active and do the work. And after they do a dozen hard work jobs, they start to tire out too. So the Depot Museum is open every summer on Saturdays and Sundays, and people come in and look at the artifacts. So I think my thinking was, I think what people are really craving are stories, are memories of our history, as might be told by the local folks. So that was the impetus for Towns of the County presentations. Oops, then I went one more. There, that's what I wanted. I want to talk about our county, Butler County. We have 12 incorporated towns, and they were all once very prosperous and very busy. These are old photographs from each of those towns in our county, and they were all vibrant. They had people who created those towns, little settlements, and they just knew their town was going to grow and become a really big deal. And they were a really big deal in the history of our county. If not for them, we wouldn't have grown. So now, although several of our little towns are just shadows of what they once were, we still do have a number of towns that have quite a bit of life in it. And David City, our county seat, is thriving right now in industry. We're getting new industry coming in, and we're so proud to have the Bone Creek Museum of Agrarian Art. They're renovating the old Ford building, and it's going to be a big deal. It already is a big deal. It pulls people from all over the country. So thanks to Bone Creek, we are designated a creative district. And countywide, we have a lot of other things going on, and there could be more, but we do have Oak Creek Sporting Club, and that actually draws hunters from all over the nation. And several of our towns have really nice little festivals during the summer months, and those bring people to our area, and we have a good county fair as well. So, still, our towns are sort of islands to themselves. It's 40 miles, from Linwood down to Surprise, and that's almost an hour drive when you're looking at navigating hills and going through little towns. So it kind of stands to reason that Linwood just doesn't know that much about Surprise. You would think we would know all about every town in our county, but we just don't. We know our little towns. And really what we know about our little towns is what Grandpa says and Grandma says, what the old guy down at the bar mumbles about, So history starts to get a little diluted. It gets a little confused. As a historical society, sometimes we hear things that people say, and it's like, that's not right. So it was important, I believe, to get the stories right and present them so people could really hear them. So people know their own town's histories, but they really don't know that much about other towns. And still, our most connected towns are along our eastern edge, and that's because they were settled by Czech immigrants in the late 1870s, and they are primarily Catholic. That's two very strong connectors, heritage and religion. So all those towns on the eastern edge, Dwight, Loma, Brainerd, Bruno, Abbey, Linwood, even though they're very far apart from each other, when you start looking at Linwood to Dwight, they still know each other because they end up at the same church stuff. And quite frankly, a lot of them are related. So, you end up, the people who moved to Linwood, then their children might have moved to Dwight, and so on and so forth. So as a county seat, David City tends to overshadow the smaller towns in the county, and sometimes that can create resentment for a variety of understandable reasons. People of David City don't necessarily go to the small towns festivals or restaurants or shops, but the small town people do come to David City. Well, that can create a little resentment. Small towns can be left out of the newspaper coverage. We get more attention. Tax dollars go to David City far more than they go to any of the small towns. We have more streets to upkeep. We've got the courthouse, we've got the public hospital, and we've got the public school system. And because many of our small town schools closed, all those kids are now being bused in to David City. Well, guess what? Their parents then have to go to David City. You take a small town with a youthful population of children and parents, and suddenly they, en masse, go to a different town. Well, a lot of things close in those small towns, and that's resentment building. Once our school closed, our town fell apart. You hear that so often from people. So, when the 150th sesquicentennial of David City came around in 2023, it spurred the idea that this might be the opportunity to turn our head and take a look at each of our small towns instead of focusing on David City. As the county seat, David City would not even exist if it weren't for the small towns. We continued to grow and stay stable because everything came through us. Way back in the times when people had to ride a horse to get to the county seat to pay their taxes or do legal things, obviously that was important for keeping David City big, but even since then, tax dollars coming through, school stuff coming through, we just stay consistent. And be assured, there is no town in our county that is a big town. We are all what I would consider rural communities, and our largest town of David City is 2,800. But we decided as a county seat, let's look at us as a county seat. Well, as a parent almost. And when you're a parent, you want your family to be all around you. Well, that's what we focused on for the 150th celebration. All of those little towns, we being one amongst all of them. So the thinking was, well, we have 12 towns, we have 12 months. Let's do 12 history programs, one per month, featuring the story of the history of that specific town. Now, the BCHS board, like I said, 5 to 7 members of people who are pretty tired at this point because they've done an awful lot of work and a lot of fundraising, they said, no, we're not who's going to give those programs. That's not what we're capable of. And that was a really good thing because it forced us to find people from the towns, each town, to do the programs. So, small towns tend to have historians. 4 of the towns in our county were people who were already involved in the BCHS. And that was David City, Ulysses, Surprise, and Brainerd. So we asked those individuals, would you be willing to give, a program about the history of your town? And they were all very excited and said yes. So we had to find 8 more people. This was quite a big task because it was quite a big ask. We were asking them to research the history of the town. We did not want people to just stand up and ramble about what Grandpa said. We needed facts. We are a historical society. And we needed them to gather photos and memorabilia so they could make a slideshow. Oh, and you need to make a slideshow. Trust me, most of the people we asked don't even get on the computer, So a historian might be 85 years old or 92 years old. They didn't necessarily know how to do that. So it was a lot of trying to figure out the logistics of everything. But we did try to find speakers that we knew would be reliable and capable. We were looking for leaders, and we tried to find people who we believed wouldn't choke at the mic, get scared, because it can be daunting talking in front of groups. We, again, advise them, you just can't stand up and say what you know. You really need to write a program. We need you to have a script. And we also told them it needed to be a 50-minute to 60-minute time frame. So needless to say, they pretty much freaked out at that one. They couldn't imagine telling the history of their town in 50 to 60 minutes. But you know what? We had faith in the people of our county, and we had faith in the process of finding them, because it was just a bunch of individuals saying, who do you know from Dwight? Is there anybody in Dwight? And then that guy would go ask the person. Well, who do you know in Abbey? Oh, okay, we know this guy. So that was our process, basically, trying to find people in each town that were going to be willing to do this work. So, but you know, I really do feel in the end they were really empowered by what they did. They really were proud of themselves. I suspect for some of these people, it was the first time they did anything like that. And, you know, they can go on now knowing, you know, I did a big thing. That was pretty cool. And it really was. Okay, so I show you this slide because I want to tell you, you can bank on local talent. We were really just looking at regular folks from our small towns. But this particular picture is a photo of the Kuchera family. The Kuchera family showed up, well, Linwood says they showed up in Linwood, but Abby says they showed up in Abby, and they fight over this family. Those two towns fight over who that family really belongs to. Because look at them, 17 children. That woman had those 17 children in 20 years. Oddly enough, the father made it to the World Herald as a champion father. So that's how that works. But several of the people in this photograph ended up growing up and being very musically inclined, and they had bands and orchestras. Well, in the 20s and 30s and 40s, bands were everything. Orchestras were everything. That was everybody's source of entertainment. So, and really, quite frankly, look that they're all healthy, attractive human beings. What an amazing thing for that era. 1874, I believe, is when they came to the area of Butler County. So people are pride. And like I said, pride can equate to talent. And these people have that, just that good upbringing that everybody looks back on and says, wow, look at that family. They came here and they made it. You know, they reproduced it and had a big old family, and they bought lots of farmland and became big farmers. And of course, these people spread out throughout Butler County. I think most of us are related to them in some way. So, but they lived their whole lives in that area. And so that is part of the generational pride local people end up having. That, you know, my mom was here, my grandmother, my great-grandmother. And I think in the end that what they told were stories, because they grew up in that area and their grandparents and their ancestors grew up in that area, they had such a sense of ownership of their towns that really showed up in their programs. And their stories were full of lots of descriptive things, and you'll hear some of the stories and you'll get the idea of what good storytelling can do as far as, you know, helping you remember history. The other great asset of having local people was that when the local boy or girl was up at the mic, the town came out, not just to support their town, not just to promote the history of their town, but they were there promoting one of their own. You know, they're, and like I said, likely a relative. So I think that's what made the difference in having such good turnouts at our events. Our presenters were not just capable of creating and giving great programs, they were amazing at it. We just were flabbergasted with how well each of them did. We found so much talent, and you would likely end up realizing how many people in the small town areas have what it takes if you just give them an opportunity. Dwight, the man pictured up in the, I have a little thing, left corner, his name is John Lavicki, and he was really well liked. He pulled a huge crowd. He had tons of relatives there. He was 92 when he gave his program. He memorized the entire thing. He did not have one note in front of him. He did not make one mistake. He told jokes, he told adages, he spoke about his faith, he talked to his family. People were yelling out questions, he was responding to them. This guy was a one-man show. The guy on the right side here, Greg Fiala, he's actually the treasurer of the BCHS. He gave his program as the character of a person from the history of his town. I thought that was pretty creative. Greg's a farmer. we didn't expect theater. He did a costume change in the middle where he stepped aside and became Alfred Palmer, the man from Ulysses from 1930-something. People are still talking about his presentation, and we put all these presentations on YouTube. His has had the most hits, 874 hits. Pretty good for a small, little tiny organization. So, and Garrison, the presenter's sisters, wrote and sang a song about all the small towns in Butler County, and it's kind of become our theme song. So, who'd have expected that you'd ask the local guy to give a program and his sisters would all say, let's write a song and get up and sing it a cappella in harmony. And it was awesome, and so I think we were all just bowled over by that, so. Pride of Place is an amazing thing as well. The presenters loved their small towns and they were honored to represent them, and they went above and beyond to show off how amazing their towns once were. And so many of these towns are now filled with old buildings that are boarded up and deteriorating. But these towns' founders had great hope and excitement of big futures, and these towns really were a big deal in the prime of their lives. And these programs were like loving eulogies to something that has died, because so many of our towns are nothing anymore, no businesses even in a couple of them. So, but they were these people's hometowns. So the BCHS had done a few programs in 2022, and we held those presentations at the Harushka Memorial Library in David City. And so it made sense for us to go on and have the next 12 presentations at the Harushka Library in David City. So we visited with them, and they agreed that they would host the programs in the library's community room, where a lot of programs in Butler County are held. But it was really worked out because the BCHS was looking for something that they could do to celebrate the sesquicentennial of David City. But what does a history organization do? We really weren't who should have been in charge of making a community festival. So we came up with this idea of how we would preserve history, and it fit right in with what the library needed. They needed a program every Monday night of the year for the first Monday of the month. So we filled a need for them, and they filled a need for us, and that they were going to host the programs. So we did set up the schedule completely based on the libraries. And the library often has programs, like I said, on the first Monday night, and they do their programs from 6:30 to 7:30, and they really like to have their speakers be done in about 50 minutes, take 10 minutes of questions, and then the library staff wants to go home because they've worked all day. So we were trying to be really courteous of that. And like I said, we asked that of our presenters, and the presenters' mouths dropped, and it's like, we can't do that. But you know what? A lot of them did. And they did an amazing job. But an hour is also about the amount of time that older people want to sit in a hard chair. Backs start to hurt, legs start to get a little fussy. So it did make sense for us to ask for hour-long programs. We shared the workload with the library. The BCHS applied for and administrated the grants. We paid the bills. We promoted the event on social media and in the newspaper. And we were the main communicators with all of the presenters. And the library had a sign-up sheet at the library, and they provided a display cabinet, which the presenters would put memorabilia from their town in the month prior. And the library also had a sign-in table, so everybody that walked in had a nice friendly hello and signed their name, and we could see later who attended. And then they stood up and introduced the program. And they did the one thing they always do for all of their programs, which is hand out bottled water and hand out free collages. They have a lady that makes collages. So that was also part of what we decided to do. So collaboration is, I think, pretty high on my list of what a community would have to consider doing if they were putting a program series together. You just get synergy, you get new ideas, you get lots of volunteers who come in to help, and you get their members who attend the programs. So you're just doubling your efforts all the way around. We knew that involving the library meant we'd have about a base group of 40 people we could be pretty safe to assume would attend the programs. And of course, we were hoping for 50 people at programs. That was even a lot, because I've gone to a lot of programs in Butler County, and 35, 40 people is a good number. So, and I would say definitely who you partner with is pretty important. I mean, I don't know if you guys work with people in the smaller communities and they come to you to ask questions about how to go about doing things. I would say you need to find those collaborators who are in line with your thoughts, maybe who have a nice crowd of people who like to go to programs, you know, so you have a little more audience. Because putting people in the seats is pretty important for any kind of person who does programming. So, and of course, towns aren't the only things that a program can focus on, or even a program series. And I was just brainstorming, and I thought, well, you know, if we did history of American Legion posts in Butler County, it would be nice to collaborate with each of the Legion posts members. You know, you'd get all those volunteers and all of their ideas and all their stories. So, or 4-H clubs, you know, they have a huge and long history in Butler County. Well, we could partner with each of the 4-H clubs leaders or extension clubs. So, you know, partnering with the right people is a big deal. So, all right, so you're gonna work with me on this one and just go with me. I use this slide because I think when you go to a restaurant with a group of friends and you have an exceptional time and the food is delicious and the drinks all come on time and the conversation flows and everybody's happy, you walk away with almost an ownership of that restaurant. You tell other people. You say, ooh, we went here and you gotta go. It was great. It's like it's your place. It's kind of like that Kuchera family that two towns fight over. And what comes with that experience of going to a restaurant? A lot of sensory perception. Sound of laughter, clinking ice in a glass, the smells of the food, the taste of the food. That's the kind of thing you can also get in stories told about history. A lot of those words that will give you an opportunity to create something sensory in your mind. And when you can affect somebody with a story with that kind of sensory perception delivered, you can get that feeling of ownership that we get just at a restaurant that's not ours at all, but yet we want to recommend that people go there. Well, my hope was that people would want to recommend other people to come to Butler County and check out our towns. And I had hoped, and I have seen actually, that they have all become promoters, not just of their towns, but of the county. And I think we're stronger if we can think as a county other than just as each town. So now I'm going to share some stories with you, and they're narrated, and they're about each of our presentations that were in the Towns of the County series.
The presenter for Bellwood told a story about how in the 1920s, a boy named Johnny picked up the mail from the depot every morning and took it to the post office downtown. His metal wheels squeaked and creaked all the way to the train depot bright and early every morning, then back downtown to take the mail to the post office. Every morning, everyone heard the racket Johnny made with his rickety wheelbarrow. We can imagine people pulling back the curtain to see Johnny, proud as punch, heading to the depot to do his job, and maybe cussing about all that infernal noise. The birds are chirping, breakfast is on the table, the train is pulling into the station, screeching to a halt, rolling open the big doors on the car to unload the mail, steam billowing out of the smokestack, and the engineer hollering out to passengers. Eventually, the people got together and brought Johnny a new wheelbarrow. And Johnny was very proud of this new wheelbarrow. Now, Mr. Bell, the presenter for Bellwood, could have simply told us that in the 1920s, Bellwood's mail came on the train and was delivered from the post office, which was located in a woman's home. But this story that he told is far easier to remember, because it gives us a mental picture. Birds chirping, the sound of the wheelbarrow, the sight of Johnny proudly pushing it down the street, the sound of the train's big iron wheels grinding to a halt, and the train whistle blowing. Stories are easier to remember than dates. John Lavicki, the presenter for the Dwight program, showed this photo of a parade honoring World War II vets. It was in 1951, and he was just a couple of years out of high school. He pointed out that he's one of the guys standing on top of the building, and he remembered the names of every man in that car, plus the medals they were awarded for their service. He was proud of this parade in his small town that had 1,500 people in attendance that day. He also said that on that day, the parish hall served 1,700 chicken dinners in one afternoon. He mentioned that most of the people in the crowd wore hats. He said, "Remember how people wore hats in those days? And nobody wore overalls. Just look at them, all dressed up in suits." He talked about how at that time Dwight didn't have a Legion post. Now, the Dwight Legion post is the largest and most active in Butler County, and John is behind that post's success. For the town of Ulysses, Greg Fiala was the presenter. He talked about how after church on Sundays, they'd go downtown and his mom would go to the meat market. He reminisced about how great the meat market smelled as his mom bought the meat she'd make for Sunday dinner. His dad would go to the little diner to have a cup of coffee with the men. If the kids had been good in church, his dad would give them money to buy candy or an ice cream cone. He also talked about a woman named Edith Gutschel. Edith had worked at the general store in Ulysses for many years, and when the store came up for sale one day, she was a little older and she could afford to buy it. It then became Edith's store. Edith lived out of town a couple miles, but she walked into town every day to run her store. Greg showed such pride for this little woman, this formidable woman who walked into town, and he said she was a character and so nice, and everyone loved Edith. Greg's stories showed his pride in his small town, but we were also treated to the senses in our memories about smells of a meat market, the bustle of a small town, the heartiness of Edith, and Greg's mom in her church clothes picking out meat, and his dad fishing coins from his pocket to give his children for their treat. Carol and Sharon Krivonic were the presenters for the town of Abbey. Carol told about how in 1963 he took his girlfriend, Sharon, on their very first date. They were young teens, and he took her to the Abbey annual carnival on their first date. You can just imagine the warm summer night and the carnival lights, the smell of cotton candy and popcorn, and the excitement of going on rides, the sound of the barkers baiting guys to win a prize for their girls, and of course we remember first dates. Carol said he talked to the carnival workers and convinced him to stop the Ferris wheel at the top, and he stole his first kiss there. What a great memory. The program for the town of Surprise had a big tough man for a presenter, a fireman, an EMT, and a man who worked in the aftermath of Katrina. Mark is a leader in his town, as was his dad and his grandfather. But when he came to the part where he talked about his dad passing away, the man who he'd shadowed as a child, Mark choked up, and he had to take a long pause to regain control. The crowd went completely silent, and I know every man in that audience thought about his father in that moment. We all thought even more highly of Mark because of his pause and his ability to take back control. This is the kind of leadership we saw again and again in our presenters. And this is how much a story well told can affect us. The presenters for the Brainerd program invited a woman to come share stories about what it was like to go to country school. As this woman talked, I visualized a dusty schoolyard, kids on their knees and little boys hollering the way they do and little girls giggling as they played marbles, a game that most of us who are under 60 just have never played. We could imagine, in the way she described it, the clink of the shooter hitting the other marbles and the sound of the school bell when it was time to go in. Also, one could imagine the pride of whichever kid won the game. The woman telling the story seemed to be reliving her childhood, and I want you to hear a portion of that woman's story.
Neighbor's marble out of the ring, and then you got to keep that marble. Well, they didn't really keep them for sure, but I mean, that was like a sport, you know. And then if you were lucky, you could do it again. But if you missed and it didn't go out of the ring, then the next little boy, he got to try it out with his shooter. And then when the recess bell rang, well, whoever had the most marbles was the winner of that game. And so,
for the town of Garrison, the presenter's three sisters sang a song that they wrote about taking a road trip around Butler County. It kind of became the theme song for the Towns of the County program series. We certainly never expected something this unique. Listen to it now.
We love cruising round, then to Abby and Bruno and Loma not too far. We love small towns. There's Dwight and Octavia, it's almost noon, and Brainerd and Belleville get there soon. Then down to Rising City, just follow 92. We love small towns. Now we're in Garrison and we're hoping the bar is open. We'll get drummies and surprise. Then we'll head west and we'll travel over gravel till we end up in Surprise. Then we'll drive down to Ulysses. What a day it's been. But back to David City, 'cause it's almost 10. We drove around the county and we'll do it again. We love small towns. We love cruising round. We love small towns.
David City's program had photos of the old homes of town when they were in their glory. Through the photos, one had a realization of hope, pride, and healthy competition. This program derived from the books of A.B. Thomas, a young man who in 1904, to raise money to go to college, went around and took photos of homes and businesses. He made albums and sold them to people in the town. At the time these photos were taken, the town of David City was only 30 years old. Our town just celebrated its 150th anniversary. Patriotism rang out in Bruno's program. They highlighted veterans and did a salute to those whose lives were lost on 9/11, which was appropriate as their program was on that date. It ended up being a powerful part of their program, and the sound of taps always tugs at heartstrings and brings out emotions. Presenter from Rising City talked about their roller rink and how people from all over the county went to it. And I can remember as a little kid sitting on the bench and putting on my roller skates and listening to the locomotion as people flew past on their roller skates, the rhythm of the music as we skated around and around. And then she also talked about how Rising City had a sand-bottom swimming pool. And you can just remember cool water splashing, youth laughing, and bright sunshine on hot summer days. These are vibrant memories that take us for that moment to a time and a place we just can't achieve by just saying dates and talking about specifics of history. Becky Rumshed, the presenter for Octavia, talked about the school in Octavia and all the different teachers over the years. She specifically remembered Lila Lou Grotushin, who was a teacher when she was a child, and she can even remember on a Saturday running to Lila Lou's house because she knew Lila would give her a piece of candy. Lila taught for 36 years in the area of Butler County, and many people remember her fondly. The Cherney family told a story about how in 1963 a flood came through their town and pretty much washed it away. Houses were swept off their foundations. There was a story about rescuing piglets before they drowned, and the cleanup proved too much for many, and they simply moved away. I hope that the whole town understood better why Linwood has struggled to stay alive, but certainly one story stuck with me. Teresa Jacobs said, when people came in to broom the water out of businesses, the water from the bars made the whole town smell like whiskey. That's
a good story, Chillin. That smell of whiskey. Wouldn't that be something to wake up to in the morning when you're all trying to clean up from a flood? It would be really difficult. Now I want to talk to you. Oh. Huh. There it is. Okay. I want to talk to you about the challenges we face, because so far I think everything I've told you has been just the positive memories, which are the majority of our memories. But we did have some challenges. The first event was for the town of Bellwood. And challenge one was that the originally selected speaker who volunteered before anybody else and who picked the first date of the year, he dropped out 2 months before the presentation. So imagine trying to find a new presenter that was going to be able to research history and write a program and come deliver it. But we did find that person. We found Bob Bell. And Bob Bell is the actual great-grandson of the founder of Bellwood. Now, we knew that Bob was the historian of Bellwood, but the truth was he had a stroke the year before. He's 86, I think. So we really just didn't want to put that on him. But we didn't really have a lot of options. Who else would know as much history as Bob? So we went to Bob and we said, would you please consider giving the program? And I don't think we even finished the sentence before he interrupted us and said, of course I will. He was actually probably a little insulted. But like I said, we didn't want to bother him. We really didn't know his condition. So I went out to Bellwood several times to visit with Bob and see if he was going to be able to do that for us. And although he had some slurring of his words and he couldn't stand for long periods of time, we thought, well, we'll get a mic, we'll kind of coach him, you got to talk slowly, and we'll give him a stool. And then when he got there that day, he also mentioned that I can't even see my notes, so you can see all the lights that we were trying to put up in front of him. But you know what? Even though Bob was in his mid-80s, he did a really amazing job. He could not stand for very long, and he wandered a little, but he did get through his history. He did speak mostly from memory as well. So I made a PowerPoint for him, and I went down to his house and showed him the PowerPoint, and I'm not sure he understood what it was. You know, he kind of thought, oh, that's cute. I've seen those pictures before, you know. So, and he did not follow the PowerPoint at all. He did his own thing, and that was okay. So challenge number 2 was that we were supposed to have all these presentations at the Harushka Memorial Library in the community room. But 5 days before our first program, a pipe burst in the library and completely flooded the community room. So we did not have access to that at all. And as a matter of fact, it would be 3 months before it was going to be able to be repaired. So the library was kind enough to rent the rental facility just down the street. It's called Winfield's, and we went in there that morning and we set up the 50 chairs because we thought we're going to get 50 people. We just know it. And basically we just had our fingers crossed, and then 119 people showed up. Winfield has only 100 chairs, so 19 people stood throughout, that entire program. But they were happy to do it. They were there to support their town. They were there to support the man who was the great-grandson of the founder of the town. This man that they'd known their whole life, Bob Bell, was a leader in his community, a leader in his county. And like I said, those people just came out with such pride for their native son. They were so supportive, and they showed him nothing but respect. It was actually an honor to watch it. So, and the sound system at Winfield's wasn't great. You had to be, it's a unidirectional mic like this, so you really have to be in front of it. Bob wasn't in front of it. He was mostly like this the whole time, and he didn't talk loud enough. So I would say, Bob, you have to talk into the mic, and then his reaction time wasn't that great, so he'd kind of grab for the mic, and the mic would fly off. So we'd go get the mic, and we'd put it back on, and then he'd grab for it again, and it would thump, thump, thump to the ground. So there was a lot of circus. It was kind of a circus. And then when he wanted to point to the pictures on the slideshow, he would take his great big wood cane and kind of slap the screen. And the lady at the back who was in charge of it was like mortified. But God bless him, he did a really good job in spite of all of that. And he went way long. We said we really needed an hour. He took an hour and a half. So all of those little kinks were getting worked out. But one of the things that I did before these presentations started was I encouraged all the presenters, please attend every presentation. And part of this was I wanted those 20 butts in the seats, so that we had somebody to fill the room. But the other part of it was that you can see what works and what doesn't work. And I think they walked away understanding you have to talk into the mic. You can't walk away or look away. You really need to write a program if you're going to get through it in the right amount of time. So they learned a couple things. But like I said, regardless of all of that, he did a great job, and the people of Bellwood were so happy with him. So we were thankful he did it. So after having 119 show up for Bellwood, we realized we needed a larger facility. So we moved our shows from Winfield to the Butler County Event Center, and it was a very good thing that we did, because the Dwight program the next week had 190 people at it. Ulysses in February had 200 people at it. Brainerd by June, we had 235. At the end of the year, the Linwood program had 250 people. And this year, our March program about the tiny unincorporated town of Loma had 319 people. So now we're settling in around that 250 mark, and we're fine with that, because if it starts to get much bigger, we're gonna have to rent a bigger facility. So yeah, we had no idea people were going to come out that strong. It was kind of flabbergasting, but also delightful. So with the large programs came a lot more money that was required, and more bottled water and more collages, and plus the cost of the event center. Keep in mind, when we planned to do it at the library, we weren't going to have to pay rent. That was free to us. We had program presenters that weren't charging us. That was free to us. Collages always just donated the library programs. We didn't really even think about that. So now suddenly we're asking this woman to make 250 collages. This is a big deal. Now we're having to have cases and cases of water brought. Again, it's a different kind of situation. So we really wanted to keep these events free, because my husband likes to say that history should be free, but it ain't cheap. And it's true. It's not. We were bending, and you guys in Lincon are going to laugh because I know places here are more expensive, but 3 hours at the event center were $150. We decided $20 for water, $20 for coffee. It was only $36 to advertise in the newspaper, and we were giving her $180 for her collages. So we did get $2,000 from the Butler County Area Foundation, and then we sought another grant for $1,000 for the Nebraska State Historical Society Foundation. And then we made a little bit of money selling history books and calendars and t-shirts and postcards, and the remaining money basically came from a donation bucket at the front door And people put their money in pretty generously for that. Promotion is obviously a super important part of any kind of a program series that you expect to get people at. I would love to be able to take credit that I was a hell of a promoter, but the truth of the matter is word of mouth promoted this more than anything else. And people were really coming to see their local person and to hear their local history. So, but still, you got to promote. So we used colorful graphics. We really relied mostly on social media because it's free. And we did get the newspaper to do some articles for us. And of course, we put in ads. And then we put out posters. And you know, oddly enough, church bulletins are a really good place to put a line about something coming up because you're sitting there for an hour in church. You got to read something. So I encouraged every presenter to be their own promoter and to talk to the people in their small communities and to make sure that the posters were up in the places they knew people were going to go. And like I said, we found out that each town was so enthusiastic about supporting their town and the person from their town who gave the program. And I would say that's definitely why we had such good crowds. And free kolaches really didn't hurt a thing. So people really liked that, and we really promoted that. And quite frankly, we're underpaying her terribly. And this next year, I'm applying for a grant that's going to pay her properly because I think that's kind of important. I know she gets up very early and bakes all day because she brings them warm. They're still warm. So, and you know, we really took it seriously that when you plan an event, you are friendly to your guests. You know, we greet people. We give hugs now. We get hugs. How you been? I didn't see you at the last promotion. Are you okay? We had one elderly woman who is always the very first person who's in the parking lot before we get there. Well, I know her story. She's a widower and she doesn't want to stay at home and be sad. She's always out all day long. Out, out, out. So this event provides something for her in the evenings, and she is the first person there. And she did not show up to one of our events, and I happened to run into her in town. And I went up to her and I said, "Oh, we missed you. Where were you? Were you okay? We were all worried about you." And she said, she almost started crying. She said, "I can't believe you worried about me. I can't believe you cared." And I said, "Of course we care." So it's that kind of little things, you know, just love your audience, love your people. If they're supporting you, you kind of get to a point where you just do. You just care about them. So I encourage the presenters to involve other people in their towns to work on the program. I think some of them thought I was shirking off my responsibilities, like, why can't she just make the PowerPoint for us? But that wasn't my goal. My goal was, if you get the neighbor kid down the street to make your PowerPoint for you, now the neighbor kid's going to come to the event, and he's going to bring his mom and dad. You know, the more people you get involved, the more ownership they have of the program. So that was what I was asking people to do. And one of the things they did in spades was ask their fellow towns members to bring memorabilia forward. So the presenters did an amazing job with memorabilia, and it became a competition. We didn't expect that, but the first event had one little table with some stuff on it. The last event had 12 tables lining 3 walls of memorabilia, and people were literally just bringing it from home. They didn't even know it was coming. One man brought an 8-foot saw that his great-great-grandfather used to cut trees in the Linwood area. So it became a competition. It became a lot of fun. Every one of these programs sort of turned into a competition, and the presenters kind of turned into stars of each of their towns, sort of like little celebrities. So, and they did such an amazing job. So, and everybody felt ownership of their town. And our BCHS volunteers put their hearts into it. They showed up. They helped in any way they could. They wanted to get involved. And now even people from the audience are involved. They help set up additional chairs if we run over. You know, we have more people than we expected. They take the chairs down, they rack them for us. So it's just a beehive. They all just jump up and start doing the job. So I think what we have is a situation that everybody really feels ownership of the history of our county. So you couldn't ask for better than that. like I said, we really didn't expect competition, but I don't know why. The memorabilia tables were the most competition, but they kind of all threw down. They'd listen to the one program, and then you could tell they just had to come up with something more creative for the next one, you know. So people were writing poems about the town and the songs, of course, that happened, and the costumes. And one guy made everybody get up and do the Pledge of Allegiance because he was a vet. So it just became kind of fun to watch. What will they do to top the last one? So, and we keep continuing to get results. At Christmas time, our library always does a parade of trees, and we just kind of threw it out there to the individual presenters and said, if you guys want to do a tree for your town. And 5 towns came into the David City Library and put up Christmas trees, and they had a great deal of fun working together to do it. And of course, we film every one of our presentations, and we put it up on YouTube, and it is the first post in the morning, the day after. When will the YouTube video be up? And every time I say, soon, it will be up. So, yeah, that's just a fun way for people to be able to relive the programs. And of course, we put out a book, and I showed it to you, and we treated it kind of like a high school annual. We sold ads for the back. And that is actually probably the majority of our money maker for 2024, and then selling the book. And we try to sell the books at primarily the Depot Museum or at the events. But we also have one grocery store in town that said, you know what, we'll buy those books from you outright at the price you charge, and we'll sell them for the same price. So this grocery store is showing some amazing leadership in our town. They don't make anything. I mean, I'm sure people shop there too. But I mean, I think that's a wonderful, wonderful thing that they're doing for us. And we have received 2 awards for this program series, and one was from our local Chamber of Commerce for, let's see, community impact, yeah. And the other I'm awfully proud of. It was from the State of Nebraska Daughters of the American Revolution. They nominated our program series and book for an Historic Preservation Recognition Award from the National Daughters of American Revolution, and we won that. And we're presented with it in June, so. And of course, I spoke at the Nebraska State Historical Society Foundation, and now I'm speaking here, so we keep enjoying being able to share the story about our towns of the county. So that's a lot of unexpected results. And we are doing 4 programs here in 2024. We call them 4 in 24. We've done the first 3 and have had good turnouts, just like the year before, a little better actually. And the final program will be in December, and it is a movie featuring the older citizens from our county telling stories about their youth. My husband and Greg Fiala, one of the presenters, have gone around and interviewed 45 different senior citizens in our county from all around the county and asked them to just talk about growing up in Butler County. And now one of the young men that was a presenter from Bruno is putting together the movie for it. So we're so excited. We've seen a little trailer of it, and it's very nice, and it's going to preserve those stories. Because people say things like, oh, I wish I had talked to Grandpa and found this out. Well, we're going to get that down, and I think that's a real gift to Butler County. And we're planning our programs for 2025. We have one of our presenters here. It is Brock Anderson, is that right? He's going to be presenting, helping present about Native Americans in Butler County, and of course, we've got several others, and a local person is leading that, so. Anyway, you never know what's going to come from a year of really hard work. And for instance, now we have 3 places in Butler County that have historic displays. It's always been the Depot Museum. The library has a heritage room. But now the Rising City Library has taken all their memorabilia and put it up in the library there in Rising City. And I'm hoping that idea kind of catches on. We have a gal in Brainerd who her and her husband bought a building, and they're toying with the idea of turning it into a little museum using that memorabilia that they collected. And I just visited with some ladies from Linwood, and they are thinking about, as a group of women, buying the old post office, which is closing, and putting up their memorabilia there. So, you know, maybe we're going to be a museum county, I don't know. But I'd really love to host like a museum crawl on a bus and have people get out at the historic sites and talk about them. But that will remain to be seen. But one of the things I'm really excited about in 2025 is our September program will be about all the cemeteries in Butler County. And there's 4 presenters working together, all local. And then one gal came in and said, you know what, I'm going to talk to the theater department at Aquinas, and the month before we're going to host cemetery tours. And these kids, they want them to dress up in period clothing and stand by the graves and then talk about the life of the person who lived, you know, who that plot was for. So I'm so excited about that. I'm so excited that these ideas just float out there and everybody grabs onto them and says, how about we do this? How about we do that? And it's not just our responsibility anymore. Everybody's taking some ownership of it. And I mean, I just love that. So, and this map just shows a little swath of our county, the center swath. There's a lot of opportunity for history tourism. We have a couple of men right now, Steve Schmidt, who you're working with, and Larry Doling, and they are putting geocaches at historic sites and creating a geocache loop for Butler County history. We didn't tell them to do this, they just said, can we do this? And it's like, of course, that's wonderful. So, and we're kind of looking at toying with creating a driving podcast tour through the Bohemian Alps, because that's something people would enjoy coming out to do on a Sunday. And maybe they'll stop in our towns, and maybe they'll have a beer at the bar or a burger. And that would be a pretty nice source of money for our economy. So, I hope you've enjoyed hearing about the Butler County Historical Society and how we're preserving our legacy through stories, using local talent and collaborating with other organizations. And I really encourage all of you to encourage whoever you talk to in these small towns to consider their local talent. Give them some room to do what they want to do, and they're going to surprise you. They're going to want to achieve for their towns and the people of their towns. So next we're going to go into the worksheets. So I gave you these because this is my thought process and how I go through planning an event. And I don't always necessarily write it down, but when I did this presentation for the Nebraska State Historical Society Foundation, they asked that I create it as a worksheet or a seminar. So you guys, I honestly feel, probably know all this already because you are all planners. But for sometimes people in smaller towns, these questions that who, what, when, where, why aren't necessarily what they're thinking of when they want to start planning. And also I really think it helps to write down, you know, the wording that you're going to be using when you talk to people about whatever project you're doing. You know, I'm trying right now to pinpoint the titles of our presentations for 2025 because you need to get that title in place so everybody on the team, when they go out and talk about it, are using the same title, because it will confuse people if you don't. So basically this first handout is a way to, you know, identify your project, know your role, so you can stay in your role and not be doing, you know, that is one of the things I notice at meetings, people stepping on each other's roles a little bit. So who's your target market? That, you know, is that who you want there, or is that who you're going to get there? You know, figure out who you're promoting to, because your social media and everything's going to look very different based on that. What needs are you going to require? For instance, for our cemetery program, clearly we're going to need the involvement of a lot of youth, and I'm glad we have an avenue for that right now. But if that's an idea you think of, you have to find that person who is your in to get whatever group you need doing what they need to do. How will you find the people to do certain tasks? You know, all of these things, you're brainstorming at a meeting and you come up with the ideas. And then, of course, how to promote your project. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts that they jotted down that they want to share? Just raise your hand if you do, and if not, I'll just keep going through these. Handout number 2 is more addressing the importance of collaboration. Now, when I was at the Nebraska State Historical Foundation presenting this, and I asked the crowd, has anybody ever collaborated? The answers that I heard did not reflect that they quite understood what I was talking about. And I think Collaboration is different than sponsorship. Collaboration is just sharing in the joy of putting something on that the whole county, town, whatever is going to love. And by sharing that, like I said, you're going to build synergy. You're going to get brand new ideas. You're going to have a whole nother workforce to help you. So I'm not sure these small towns all understand that, hey, I've got a lot of organizations here in my small town, and it's not going to hurt a thing to collaborate with them because it's going to help us in the long run. And it just brings a whole new level and different people to your events. So, you know, this handout is all about who could you partner with for certain events. And identifying what it is you're asking them to do and being ready to tell them what you'll do for them, because it's a two-way street. You really can't just expect them to give all the time. Handout number 3 is all about fundraising. You know, we have some organizations in our local town that they just want to do a burger feed all the time. And to me, I feel like an organization needs to be thinking about what is reflective of what you do. You know, we're a history organization. We have nothing to do with hamburgers. You know, so when you see an organization just doing a spaghetti feed, a soup supper, you know, I love it when they think of something creative and work within their own, what they know and do. So, does anybody have anything to add about fundraising? Promotion ideas, I would say target market is probably the key, and I'm sure you guys could all teach me a thing or two about that. But, you know, I love this table from Pew Partnership because it shows me that our people, I know we're getting people 50 and above. Yeah, we're getting some kids. Yeah, we're getting 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds and 40-year-olds. But really, the majority of people at our events are 50 and above. And they're on YouTube, and they're on Facebook. And quite frankly, that's what we use the most. So, yeah. And that's my presentation. So does anybody have any questions? I thank you for being such a nice audience and for inviting me to come.
Thank you, Gina, for your presentation today. I'm hoping that staff members came away with some possible ideas and things that we can discuss later this afternoon, because we'll divide up into 3 major groups, and we'll see if there's some discussion follow-up based upon her handout, as well as some of the things that she talked about. This is the second time I've heard her program, and I picked up things that I missed in the first program. So I hope that we can have a good discussion today about that. But again, Gina, thank you for coming in, and I appreciate you giving some insight to the rural parts of our state and the challenges that you've been facing. I think we can learn from a lot of the examples that were given that maybe sometimes has not been discussed as well as it could have been in the last few years. This afternoon, Ben will be giving some insights to some of our other groups besides the rural areas that we are looking into for future programming. So you'll get another side of some of the other plans that we're looking at in the future. So if you would like to talk to Gina, I know she and her husband are staying for lunch, so feel free to ask them any questions if you prefer just to ask them directly to them. So thank you.